Te encuentras en Siniestros, Relatos. Este lugar sombrío y tétrico alberga historias tan espeluznantes que harán que tu respiración se entrecorte y tu corazón palpite desesperadamente. Aquí, en la profundidad de la noche, los relatos cobran vida propia, revelando pesadillas que ningún ser humano debería enfrentar jamás. El horror aguarda pacientemente, escondido en cada palabra pronunciada, esperando para atraparte desprevenido y arrastrarte hacia el abismo de la desesperación más profunda. Escucha con atención si te atreves. Certain ruins possess a siren song, and the derelict infirmary perched on Blackwood Ridge sang loudest to Elias. It festered there, a known blight on the town's edge, a place spoken of in hushed tones, freighted with tales of phantom noises and fleeting apparitions. Such local lore never snagged Elias. Disbelief was his default. He craved the tangible, the empirical evidence only his own senses could provide. Ghosts were fiction. The night he chose for his pilgrimage was raw, the air stagnant and still beneath a sky bruised with unseen clouds, lending the landscape an artificial twilight. He left his car nestled discreetly down the lane, approaching the skeletal Mercy Hospital on foot, flashlight clutched like a talisman. It reared before him, a jagged silhouette against the deepening gloom, immense and brooding. Shattered panes stared like vacant eyes, doors lolled drunkenly from hinges, and tenacious vines clawed up the stone facade. A sprawling, multi-winged beast, long surrendered to neglect. Elias eased his frame through a jagged aperture where glass once resided, stepping into the belly of the building. The air met him thick and cool, laden with the scent of molder, a damp, penetrating chill misplaced even for the season. Silence, profound and absolute, pressed against his eardrums, heavy as unshed tears, as if the structure itself held its breath in anticipation. His flashlight beam sliced the dark, illuminating a blizzard of dust motes. The floor lay buried beneath the detritus of sudden departure. Fractured tiles, the splintered carcasses of furniture and yellowed documents scattered like fallen leaves. He moved with deliberate slowness, the crunch of debris underfoot echoing unnervingly in the vast quiet. Past examination rooms, administrative husks, a waiting area frozen in time. Everything seemed arrested mid-moment, chairs still marshaled in neat rows, archaic medical apparatus rusting in corners, faded posters clinging to walls, their warnings against forgotten plagues now morbidly quaint. Venturing deeper into the hospital's labyrinthine gut, the chill intensified, coalescing into a palpable unease that prickled the nape of his neck. He rationalized it as simple tension, the mind playing tricks in the dark. Yet the quality of the silence felt inherently wrong. Too expectant, too aware. It felt like being watched by the walls themselves. Down a long, decaying corridor he trod, the flashlight's cone dancing over peeling paint and spectral signage indicating defunct wards. The surgical wing beckoned, the nexus, according to local legend, of the hospital's most persistent hauntings. Curiosity overruled caution. Mid-stride, a sound, faint, furtive, like the scuff of a hesitant footstep somewhere in the gloom ahead. Elias froze, straining his ears, holding his breath against the sudden frantic hammering in his chest. Nothing. Only the profound stillness returned, amplifying the thud of his own pulse. Just the building settling, he reasoned, the wind sighing through broken panes. Anything but the chilling intuition that he was not alone. The surgical wing was a pocket of deeper darkness, its grimy windows offering little concession to the night outside. Another corridor stretched before him, flanked by smaller rooms. Each chamber held a stark metal table at its heart, flanked by banks of empty cabinets. On some tables lay stained, time-rotted sheets, faint outlines of surgical tools, dulled and oxidized, hinted at their former purpose. He entered one such room, sweeping the light across barren shelves coated in a velvet layer of dust. The beam drifted towards the central table, stark and cold. And then he saw it. There, stark against the gray film coating the surgical steel, a handprint. Not ancient, but disturbingly present. Small, undeniably childlike, its edges blurred where tiny fingers had seemingly dragged through the grime, a desperate smear in the stillness. His breath hitched. A cold moisture bloomed on his skin. An animal, he told himself fiercely, a raccoon or possum that had found ingress. But the clarity, the deliberate nature of the mark, refuted the easy explanation. Backing slowly from the room, Elias swung the flashlight beam nervously down the hall, probing the shadows. Empty, silent. Yet the sensation of being observed intensified, tightening like a knot in his stomach. He turned, resolved to retreat, but a single step forward was arrested by a new sound. A susurrus, thin as spider silk, brushing against the edge of hearing from further down the passage. Less like words, more like the dry rustle of secrets escaping confinement, urgent and insistent. He stood rooted, listening, trying to pinpoint the source. It seemed to emanate from just around the neck corner. Against every screaming instinct, he crept forward, the flashlight trembling, its beam skittering across the decaying surfaces. As he rounded the bend, the whispering ceased abruptly, plunging the corridor back into its profound, weighted silence. He swept the light frantically. Nothing. Just more empty doorways gaping into blackness. A tremor traced its way down his spine. Retreat. Now. But as the thought formed, he heard it again. The shuffling, closer this time, originating from behind him. He spun, bathing the corridor back the way he'd come in harsh light. Still empty. Just the cold, silent expanse stretching away into the dark. His pace quickened, steps becoming unsteady, echoing over loud in the cavernous structure. The feeling of pursuit was undeniable now, a palpable presence just beyond the periphery of his vision. Patient, watchful. His heart slammed against his ribs, breath coming in shallow gasps as fear, cold and sharp, began its ascent. He reached the grand main hall, the exit almost within grasp, when a sound reached him that turned his blood to ice. Laughter, a child's, unmistakably, yet thin and brittle, echoing strangely as if filtered through water or decades. It seemed distant at first, then closer, seeming to drift towards him down the cavernous space. Elias stopped dead, mind reeling. Impossible. This place was a tomb. The laughter chimed again, nearer still. He stumbled backward, flashlight shaking violently. Panic surged, a primal command to flee, warring with feet that felt leaden, anchored to the debris-strewn floor. Then flickering at the edge of his vision, a figure. At the corridor's far end, where shadows congealed into impenetrable black, stood a silhouette. Indistinct, yet undeniably small, humanoid. It didn't move, offered no threat, merely observed, its presence a sudden icy weight in the stagnant air. A slight tilt of the head, a gesture of unnerving, silent curiosity. Elias turned and bolted. His flight hammered through the echoing halls, a desperate sprint towards the promise of the outside world. No looking back, no hesitation, only the frantic rhythm of his own escape, heart threatening to burst, mind fractured by terror. He slammed through the groaning doors and into the night, gulping the cold, clean air in ragged bursts. He didn't cease running until he reached the sanctuary of his car, fumbling keys with hands that shook too violently to easily find the lock. Engine roaring to life, he sped away, refusing the urge to glance in the rearview mirror to confirm the emptiness behind him. Days have bled into weeks since Elias fled the carcass of St. Jude's, yet the hospital hasn't entirely released him. The shadow child lingers behind his eyelids, a persistent afterimage burned onto his psyche. And in the deepest hours, when the house settles into its own quietude, a faint sibilance sometimes threads through the silence. An echo, perhaps, or a promise he cannot decipher. A chilling souvenir from the place where disbelief died. That infernal wireless refuses silence. Whether disconnected from the wall or consigned to the oblivion of a roadside ditch, it finds its way back, inevitably resurrected on the workbench, whispering static into the hours past midnight. So it has been since my return to this inherited acreage. I'd envisioned a quiet stewardship of my father's fallow ranch, uncomplicated. Delusion. Now this obstinate piece of junk orchestrates my unease. My arrival was a Monday, the sun already high and heavy, procrastination finally yielding to duty. Externally, the ranch remained a stubborn photograph of the past. The main house, a weary structure of flaking paint, its porch steps bowed with age. The roof held its line, though my trust in it was thin. Weeds surged knee-high around the porch foundations, a green tide against weathered wood. Heat pressed down, humid and thick, drawing beads of sweat across my brow. The air carried the familiar, potent blend of old manure and decaying hay. Sense of a youth I seldom chose to revisit. Instinct drew me first to the barn, its structural integrity a primary concern. My father had haunted this space, a sanctuary of sawdust and solitude. There, perched on a scarred workbench, sat his radio. Country tunes had once filled the cavernous quiet while he'd puttered with forgotten projects. No profound sentiment bound me to the object, yet its reappearance stirred a peculiar resonance. It seemed frailer, more ancient than memory served. Its plastic shell, once cream, now bore the yellow patina of age. The antenna listed drunkenly. My hand swept across its dusty crown. The tuning dial, wedged stubbornly between frequencies, yielded slightly to my touch. A sharp burst of static spat from the speaker. I traced the cord to the wall socket. pulled the plug and left the wireless dormant on the bench before retreating to the house. Inside, after depositing my luggage, I flung open windows, inviting a cross breeze to challenge the stale, trapped air. Decades of dust motes danced in the invading sunlight. What future awaited the ranch remained undecided between my sister, Ilara, and me. Keep it, sell it, let it crumble? For now, the burden of sorting furniture, detritus, the garage's contents, fell solely on my shoulders. Ilara, residing states away, would descend only if summoned by crisis. Weariness settled deep in my bones. I retrieved a water bottle from the cooler I'd brought, draining half in greedy gulps. A glance at my phone confirmed the expected. No signal. Out here, isolation was the norm. I shrugged, pocketing the device. That inaugural night descended into a profound quiet, shattered around 1 in the morning. Sleep, found fitfully on the living room sofa, the bedroom unprepared, was broken by a faint, insistent crackling. So subtle initially, I dismissed it as auditory illusion, the mind playing tricks in the unfamiliar dark. Yet listening intently, the sound resolved. Static, undeniably, threaded with the ghost of a country melody. His station, my father's station. Pushing myself upright, I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. Moonlight filtered through the grimy window panes, offered the room's only illumination. The sound emanated from outside. Perhaps I'd forgotten another plug, another device. No, the radio in the barn. I was certain I'd disconnected it. Barefoot, I crossed the threshold onto the dew-slick grass, my pulse quickening despite myself. The massive barn door groaned open on protesting hinges. The overhead bulb remained stubbornly dark. My phone's flashlight cut a nervous beam through the gloom. There it sat, on the workbench, emitting a faint, internal glow. The dial's needle quivered almost imperceptibly. Low static hissed from its speaker. My gaze shot to the corner outlet. The radio's cord lay coiled beside it, plugged into nothing but air. A difficult swallow. Residual charge, I reasoned. Some quirk of capacitors I didn't understand. Electronics were a mystery. Panic seemed premature. I picked up the radio, its plastic cool beneath my fingers, twisted the volume knob until it clicked decisively off. Silence flooded back. Replacing it on the bench, a tremor in my hands. I secured the barn door and retreated to the house, locking everything tight before forcing myself back towards uneasy sleep. Morning arrived with a crick in my neck and an ache radiating from my spine, courtesy of the sofa. After a rudimentary breakfast, my first destination was the barn, needing visual confirmation of the radio's silence. It was inert. I hefted it, carried it outside with grim purpose, and deposited it into a rusted, disused trash barrel near the property line. No repairs were planned, no nocturnal static desired. My day was for purging, clearing the house, inspecting fence lines. Hours were spent wrestling trash bags, sifting through boxes crammed with the ephemera my father could never discard. Faded photographs, brittle papers, objects devoid of obvious meaning. He wasn't a man given to sentiment. Later that afternoon, seeking a signal, I drove several miles down the county road to a familiar rise. Ilara answered, her voice distant. I outlined my intention to stay a few more days. She offered assent, then asked casually if anything felt strange. A pause stretched. I relayed the radio incident, the unplugged static, the trash bin. Had she visited recently, perhaps retrieved it? Confusion colored her denial. It was nothing, I concluded quickly, ending the call with a disquiet I couldn't shake. Returning to the ranch, a cold certainty guided me back to the barn. My stomach clenched. There it sat, resurrected on the workbench, indistinguishable from before. Same dust film, same canted antenna. I simply stared for a long moment, then, hesitantly, tapped its casing. Lifting it, I turned the knob. Static bloomed instantly. I clicked it off again, my hands now distinctly unsteady. Frustration warred with a creeping dread. A radio, discarded, returning inexplicably? It defied logic. Leaving the barn, I secured the door with a heavy antique padlock I found hanging nearby. The mechanism, though old, engaged with a satisfying thud. I tugged the door twice, ensuring its hold. I forced myself toward other chores, sweeping floors, bagging more junk, preparing a solitary meal. Yet my thoughts kept circling back, snagged on the impossible radio. Had I misremembered the trash bin? Used one inside the barn. Stress, I told myself. Loneliness playing tricks in this isolated place. Midnight approached. I retreated to my old bedroom, leaving a lamp burning against the encroaching darkness. And then, precisely around 1, it began again. The low fizz of static, a spectral tune buried within. Bolting upright, heart hammering against my ribs, I listened. I willed it to cease, but the sound persisted, an insidious whisper from the locked barn. How? I pulled on trousers, grabbed the flashlight, my mouth suddenly parched. A long drink of water on the way out. At the barn door, the padlock remained firmly in place. Shining the flashlight beam through a narrow gap between the weathered planks, I saw it. A faint, pulsating glow from the workbench. Pressing my ear to the rough wood, the static intensified. Sweat prickled the back of my neck. My fingers fumbled with the heavy lock until it sprang open. I eased the door ajar. The radio's light throbbed rhythmically. Beneath the static, a country melody drifted, slow and distorted, the lyrics unintelligible, unlike any broadcast I knew. Stepping inside, flashlight beam pinned to the source, the thrum of my own pulse filled my ears. As I approached, the radio's crackle deepened, the volume dipping slightly, as if acknowledging my presence. My hand reached out, found the knob, twisted it off. Click. Silence. I yanked the useless cord for good measure, then carried the offending object outside. Locking the barn once more, I located my father's old fire pit, a circle of stones used for burning brush. I set the radio on the packed earth. Feeling absurdly theatrical, I fetched a hammer from a nearby toolbox. Blow after blow rained down until the bakelite casing fractured. The speaker cone popped loose. The dials skittered away. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. Dropping the hammer, I gathered the shattered remains and tossed them into the cold pit. No kindling yet, but tomorrow, incineration. Wiping my brow, the extremity of my actions struck me. Yet the thought of seeing that radio whole again was unbearable. Back inside, I scrubbed my hands, courted sleep, and found only exhaustion. Dawn broke. My first thought, the fire pit. I hurried outside, empty, utterly void. No plastic shards, no mangled wires, no speaker cone. I scanned the surrounding dirt, searching for signs of animal scavenging, finding nothing. A tightness constricted my chest. Back to the barn. And there, enthroned on the workbench, it waited. Whole, unblemished, no cracks, no dents. The dial perfectly seated, the antenna bent just so. I stood, breathing shallowly, a profound nausea churning within. A chill traced my spine despite the warming morning air. Tentatively, I reached out, touched its surface. Cold. I turned it on. Static erupted, clicked it off. Backing away, I locked the barn for the third time and retreated to the house, seeking refuge, seeking sanity. Ilara's voice, when I finally reached her again, was laced with cautious concern. I tried to articulate the impossibility, the reappearance, the smashing, the resurrection. Was I sleeping enough? She queried gently. Exhaustion, she suggested, could make one misplace things, even imagine. Destroying a different radio, perhaps? Hallucinating the act? My frayed nerves snapped. I bit back a harsh retort, apologized curtly. The call ended, leaving me utterly alone with the inexplicable. I spent hours walking the property lines, needing the physical exertion, the tangible reality of fence posts and wire. Checked for damage, planned repairs. Considered neighbors, pranks, unlikely. The nearest homestead was miles off, occupied by an elderly widower unlikely to engage in such elaborate, unsettling games. That night, I waited in the brightly lit kitchen, a sentry against the encroaching dark. Midnight passed. My eyelids grew heavy, but I fought sleep. Then, punctual as ever, at 1 o'clock, the static. Not loud, more a faint sibilance on the edge of hearing. Through the kitchen window, the barn stood dark, yet I knew. The radio was alive. My heart began its familiar, frantic rhythm. I remained seated, breathing deliberately, trying to anchor myself. Finally rising, flashlight in hand, I stepped outside. Cool grass beneath my boots, the scent of damp earth rising. At the barn door, I listened. The static whispered its secret. This time I didn't unlock it. I simply stood there, thoughts fragmenting. The need for silence, for normalcy, was a physical ache. How to stop it? How to make it end? After an indeterminate time, I turned back to the house, secured the door, and lay down, sleep remaining elusive. The radio's phantom energy hummed in my mind. How did it turn on? Why did it return? Would it ever cease? A dull headache throbbed behind my eyes. Eventually, as the first hint of dawn painted the sky, oblivion claimed me. Waking late, I performed the ritual check. The barn, silent. The radio, present, ordinary. I regarded it for a moment, a silent standoff, then turned and walked away. Back in the house, I began to pack. Clothes, essentials tossed into bags, loaded into the truck. Escape felt like the only sane option. Before departing, I stood before the locked barn door, a final moment of indecision. Should I try again? Burn it? Bury it deeper? In the end, I simply left it secured. Driving away, a knot tightened in my throat. I was leaving the ranch, but the radio remained, an unyielding presence destined to hum its static lullaby after midnight. No explanation offered itself, no logic applied. All I knew was its persistence, its refusal to be discarded or destroyed, its insidious crackle, the ghostly country tune. They wouldn't easily leave my memory. A break was necessary. I'd done my part, sorted what I could. If more was required, Ilara could hire help. I wanted no further part in the radio's strange vigil. The truck kicked up dust as I hit the main road, eyes glancing in the rearview mirror until the ranch dissolved into the landscape. The static was gone for now. Reaching the highway, I accelerated, putting miles between myself and that barn. The radio stayed behind. I imagine it still whispers its static into the night. I have no desire to confirm it. Let Ilara deal with it, if she dares. I am finished. The reflection caught me first. Eyes snagged mine in the polished curve of the rearview mirror. A current, cold and immediate, shot through me. This voyage through the ink-dark hours would be no ordinary passage. Beneath the cowl of a dark hood, that gaze seemed not just to see, but to penetrate, igniting an ancient dread I couldn't articulate, let alone dismiss. I didn't know then, couldn't have grasped, that this was merely the threshold of a journey poised to fray the very fabric of my mind. Elara is my name. I navigate the labyrinthine world of postgraduate studies at the City University. That particular night found me returning campus-ward, the scent of my parents' home still clinging faintly to my clothes after a weekend respite. 4 hours stretched between departure and destination, and fiscal prudence had dictated the nightliner, a vessel charting the dark veins of the highway, a choice sealed in naivete. Scarcely populated, the bus sighed as I boarded. A few solitary figures dotted the seats like forgotten luggage. I claimed a space mid-ship, nesting into the worn upholstery, anticipating nothing more than the drone of the engine and the slow dissolve of miles. It was only as we slipped the station's embrace that the silhouette coalesced in the rearmost seat, indistinct, shrouded in that dark hoodie. Just another traveler cloaked in anonymity, I reasoned. Yet as town after sleeping town bled passengers into the night, their departures marked by the pneumatic hiss of the doors, a stark awareness dawned. Only 3 souls remained adrift in the humming metal shell: the driver, myself, and the watcher in the back. Then, the sensation. A crawl of ice along my nape, the unmistakable pressure of being observed. Paranoia, I chided myself, a phantom conjured by fatigue and solitude. But conviction wavered each time my gaze flickered, almost involuntarily, to the mirror above the driver. Those eyes, persistent, unwavering. In the cabin's dim theater, his face remained a smudge of shadow, yet the sheer constancy of his stare was profoundly disquieting. Never deviating, never blinking, just twin embers glowing faintly in the gloom, fixed entirely on me. My focus sought refuge in the window, a futile gesture. Only my own pale reflection stared back, superimposed on the rushing, featureless dark. The engine's thrum, the rhythmic jolt over unseen imperfections in the road, these were the sole anchors in a profound, unnerving quiet. An eternity seemed to spool out before resolve hardened. I would break this unnerving tableau. Gathering my meager belongings, I migrated forward, deliberately charting a course that kept my back to the rear, seeking sanctuary nearer the driver. A fragile peace settled, momentary and thin. Then a flicker at the edge of my vision. Movement. The hooded shape had also shifted, resettling itself several rows behind my new position, preserving the unsettling distance, the invisible tether. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This geometry of fear was no accident. A plea to the driver formed, a desperate urge to be deposited roadside anywhere but here. Yet the landscape scrolling past was utter desolation, swallowed by unlit miles. The prospect of abandonment on that lonely stretch felt like leaping from one abyss into another. My fingers scrabbled for my phone, a lifeline, only to find the screen barren, no signal. We were adrift in a pocket of technological silence, utterly isolated. The subsequent hour stretched thin as torment. I sat bolt upright, every sinew taut, ears straining against the engine's drone for any betraying sound from behind. Once, twice, I imagined the soft scuff of a footstep on the aisle runner. Each time, a whiplash turn revealed only the static figure, the relentless eyes pinning me in place. Relief, tentative and frail, began to bloom as the first tendrils of the city's glow touched the horizon. Nearly there. Safety was minutes away. And then, the world tilted. The bus gave a violent shudder, the engine coughing, sputtering into silence. We coasted to a halt on the shoulder, the interior lights flickering with theatrical menace before extinguishing altogether, plunging us into absolute blackness. "Apologies, folks," the driver's voice boomed, unnaturally loud in the sudden vacuum. "Bit of engine trouble, seems like. Stay put. I'll have a look." A scream lodged itself in my throat, a silent protest against his departure. "Don't leave me." The words wouldn't form. Powerless, I watched his silhouette vanish down the steps, swallowed by the night. Alone. The oppressive weight of the unseen presence behind me intensified, thick with unspoken malice. Silence descended again, vast and suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic percussion of my own breath. Then, scuff. Soft, deliberate. Footsteps advancing slowly up the central aisle. Pure, unreasoning panic surged. Escape. Without conscious thought, I catapulted from my seat, stumbling blindly towards the front. My hand, trembling violently, fumbled with the door lever. It yielded with a pneumatic gasp. I tumbled out, hitting the cool, damp air of the roadside like a physical blow. The driver vanished. Had it been moments? An hour? Time had become elastic, meaningless. I ran. Sheer instinct propelled me, my shoes striking sparks from the indifferent tarmac. Directionless, driven only by the imperative to create distance. Behind me, the distinct sigh of the bus door reopening. He was following. My lungs burned, muscles screaming in protest, yet I pushed harder, fueled by terror. Still the sound pursued, a metronome of dread, his footsteps steady, implacable. Just as exhaustion threatened to claim me, light flared ahead, the fluorescent glare of a gas station, an electric oasis in the vast darkness. A final desperate surge carried me towards it. I burst through the glass door, colliding with the startled gaze of a lone attendant, drowsy behind the counter. "Help me!" I choked out, air tearing at my throat. "Please, someone's chasing me!" His eyes widened, taking in my state of wild disarray. His hand was already reaching for the phone, dialing even as he asked, "What's wrong? Who is it?" But as I spun, arm outstretched to point back down the desolate road to indicate my pursuer, a glacial tide washed through my veins. Nothing. The asphalt ribbon stretched empty into the night, flanked by impenetrable darkness. No one was there. The arrival of the police brought a barrage of questions that only deepened the fog of confusion and fear. Their search yielded nothing. No hooded man, no trace of pursuit. The bus sat inert where we'd left it, the driver, grease-stained and oblivious, tinkering beneath the raised engine cover. As the adrenaline ebbed, reason, that unwelcome guest, began its insidious whisper. Had fatigue and stress woven this entire terrifying tapestry, a waking nightmare born of academic pressure and sleeplessness? Yet even as my rational mind scrabbled for explanations, the memory remained indelible. Those eyes, burning with unwavering focus through the long night. Real or hallucinated, the terror had been utterly authentic. The officers offered a ride back to campus, a kindness I accepted with numb gratitude. Driving away from the fluorescent island of the gas station, a compulsion made me look back one last time. And there, hovering at the precise edge where light surrendered to shadow, I thought I saw it, a figure cloaked in darkness, watching me depart. The night bus became a ghost in my personal geography, a route I never traveled again. Weeks dissolved into a blur of heightened anxiety, flinching from phantoms in the periphery, avoiding solitude in public realms. Friends and family offered concern, murmuring suggestions of therapy, medication, remedies for a mind they perceived as overwrought. But I carried the weight of the experience, inexplicable though it remained. There are fractures in the mundane, where logic fails, and shadows detach themselves from objects. Sometimes these shadows ride the late-night routes, patient and watchful. To this day, the sight of a hooded sweatshirt can send my heart into a frantic cadence. Solitary nocturnal travel remains unthinkable, and sometimes, lost in the anonymity of a crowd, that familiar icy crawl returns to my nape. A swift turn reveals nothing, no one of consequence. But a certainty settles deep within me. Somewhere, perhaps just beyond the veil of the visible, those eyes are still watching, waiting for our path to inevitably converge once more. So should you find yourself adrift on a sparsely occupied bus as the world sleeps, and a sense of being studied settles upon you, heed that internal tremor. Trust the instinct. For not all monsters reside solely in the imagination. Occasionally they occupy the seat just behind you, shrouded in plain sight, biding their time. As for me, daylight travel holds sway now. Some destinations simply aren't worth the peril of the journey, for one never truly knows who or what might be sharing the ride. The corrugated container, deceptively weighty, groaned under its burden as I coaxed it from a high, dust-furred shelf. Professor Finch's study was less an office, more a stratified labyrinth of forgotten texts, curious relics and overflowing file drawers. Yet this particular carton pulsed with an odd significance. No label marked its flanks, only layers of brittle ambered packing tape sealing it shut. A shiver, cold and unwelcome, traced my spine as I lowered it onto the scarred mahogany desk. An intuition, sharp and insistent, whispered that I stood on the threshold of secrets best left undisturbed. I'm Ilara, by the way. Graduate student, temporary custodian of flora and fauna, specifically one wilting fern and a suspiciously lethargic goldfish. And now, it seemed, accidental archaeologist, digging through the strata of a mystery I hadn't volunteered for. It began benignly. Professor Finch, my dissertation guide, off to a symposium in Strasbourg, needed someone reliable. "Just keep the philodendron hydrated and retrieve the post, Ilara," he'd murmured, keys pressed into my palm with an absent-minded geniality. "Oh, and perhaps impose a modicum of order on my study. If you find the time, of course." He'd neglected to mention his study resembled a collision between a Bodleian annex and a cabinet of curiosities, followed by a minor detonation. Days I'd spent navigating the paper drifts, attempting to catalog the bibliophilic chaos, wrestling the entropy into some semblance of organization. That's when the carton surfaced. Hesitation seized me, my fingers hovering above the aged tape. This wasn't part of the brief. Water plants, collect mail, maybe alphabetize a shelf. Not this. Logic dictated retreat. Slide it back, erase its existence from my short-term memory. But curiosity, that viperous counselor, coiled and struck. Before reason could reassert itself, a brass letter opener was in my hand, its edge slicing cleanly through the seal. A breath of time passed, thick with the scent of decaying paper and bindings, escaped the opened flaps. Inside lay a trove of journals, their leather covers yielding softly to the touch, pages the color of old parchment. Interspersed among them were photographs bleached by time, brittle newspaper fragments, and documents bearing official-looking crests, all relics of bygone decades. I lifted the uppermost journal. Its cover, worn smooth, felt strangely intimate. Flipping it open, I recognized Professor Finch's precise, slanted script. Yet the date inscribed at the page's head, 1987, arrested me. Finch would have been barely out of his teens then. As my eyes scanned the first lines, the cluttered study dissolved. The relentless tick-tock of the mantel clock, the distant hum of afternoon traffic, all faded into irrelevance. I plunged headlong into a narrative that strained credulity. The journal chronicled Finch's inaugural anthropological venture, a youthful pilgrimage deep into the Amazonian green hell, pursuing whispers of an uncontacted tribe possessing uncanny gifts. What he encountered there, however, shattered the foundations of the known. He wrote of a people who conversed without sound, mended flesh with mere contact, possessed knowledge seemingly gleaned from the ether itself. Initial entries wrestled with skepticism, grasping for logical frameworks. But the weight of observation pressed down, forcing him toward impossible conclusions. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I navigated the brittle pages. Photographs depicted individuals adorned with intricate markings that seemed to phosphoresce in the jungle's perpetual twilight. Detailed botanical sketches illustrated flora unknown to any taxonomy, annotated with notes on their purported transcendental properties. Rituals were described, ceremonies that appeared to casually disregard the known laws of the physical world. Yet progressing deeper, the tenor of the script shifted. Wide-eyed wonder curdled into apprehension, then outright fear. The final entries were scrawled, the ink bleeding urgency, the neat hand degenerating into near illegibility. Finch spoke of unseen watchers, of unsettling accidents, too patterned to be coincidence. The last page terminated abruptly, mid-thought, a sentence severed as if by a sudden, violent interruption. I lowered the journal, my own hands unsteady. This felt too visceral for fiction, too raw for academic speculation. Yet sifting through the carton's remaining contents painted an even more disturbing tableau. Documents, starkly official despite heavy redactions, yielded chilling phrases, specimens secured, anomalous cognitive function. News clippings, yellowed and fragile, reported the inexplicable vanishing of an entire indigenous community in the specified region of the Amazon. And the photographs, some frustratingly blurred, motion-streaked, captured figures that belonged more to cinematic phantasmagoria than sober reality. As the fragments coalesced, a profound chill permeated the room, settling deep in my bones. If this chronicle held even a kernel of truth, Professor Finch had unearthed something monumental, something terrifying, the sort of revelation powerful entities would move mountains or people to suppress. Why hoard such volatile proof? Why leave it accessible, albeit hidden, in his academic nest? The answer struck with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't oversight. It was a fail-safe, a dead man's switch. Should anything befall him, the truth had a chance, however slim, of surfacing. As if summoned by the thought, my phone vibrated against the desk. An unfamiliar number. The text message was brief, brutal. Leave it. Forget you saw anything. Walk away. My blood turned to ice water. My gaze darted frantically around the room, half expecting eyes in the shadows, a face at the window pane. Nothing. Just the placid, sun-drenched street of a university town settling into its late afternoon torpor. Prudence screamed at me to obey, to repack the Pandora's box, reseal it, feign ignorance. But the hook was set too deep. The enigma was too potent, its potential ramifications too vast. If Finch's discovery was genuine, it threatened to rewrite the very definition of human potential. With fingers that trembled, betraying the resolve hardening within me, I began capturing images. Notebook pages, cryptic documents, haunting photographs. Each artifact meticulously documented. The digital copies uploaded instantaneously to encrypted cloud storage. Whatever storm was brewing, a record would endure. My thoughts raced, a frantic scramble. Who sent the warning? How did they know? And the crucial question, where was Professor Finch, truly? Was Strasbourg merely a convenient fiction? So consumed was I by this urgent archiving. The approaching sounds were almost upon me before they registered. Deliberate, heavy footfalls echoing in the corridor, halting directly outside the study door. Keys rattled in the lock. Panic flared, hot and suffocating. I scrambled, shoving the contents haphazardly back into the carton, heedless of their former order. The flaps were barely closed when the door swung inward. Two figures occupied the threshold. Men in severe, dark suits, their faces impassive, their presence radiating an unnerving authority that had nothing to do with campus security. One advanced a step, his right hand dipping inside his jacket. "Miss Vance?" His voice was level, devoid of inflection. "We need you to accompany us." I retreated instinctively, my mind a maelstrom. My name? How? What do they want? The answers, stark and terrifying, needed no articulation. They were here for the carton, for the secret nestled within. I don't understand. I stammered, striving for a composure I didn't feel. Professor Finch just asked me to water the plants. The man's expression remained unchanged, glacial. Let's avoid unnecessary complications. We have some inquiries regarding your recent findings. My eyes flickered towards the window. Second floor. A survivable drop. If I could just reach it. He anticipated the thought, moving with startling agility to intercept my potential path. That would be ill-advised, Miss Vance. We merely wish to talk. Yet the predatory stillness in his gaze belied the innocuous words. Talk was not on their agenda. Whatever Finch had exhumed, whatever truths lay dormant in that cardboard repository, these men were the instruments of its reburial. In that compressed instant, a choice crystallized. This couldn't end with quiet compliance, with the truth smothered before it could draw breath. Fueled by a surge of pure adrenaline, I seized the heavy carton and hurled it directly at them. In the fleeting second of their startled reaction, I bolted past, bursting into the empty hallway. I ran, down the echoing stairwell, through the building's main doors, propelled by a terror I'd never known. Shouts erupted behind me, the thudding pursuit of heavy shoes on linoleum. But I didn't dare look back. I fled, pavement blurring beneath my feet, away from the academic sanctuary, into the anonymity of the town's bustling arteries. Gasping for air in the relative shadow of a narrow alleyway, the enormity of the shift crashed down. My life, the predictable trajectory of Ilara Vance, graduate student, had irrevocably fractured. I was entangled in something vast, a hidden history stretching across decades and continents. The physical box was gone, surrendered in my escape, but I possessed the images. I held the knowledge, and I faced a precipice. Retreat into oblivion, attempt to reconstruct a semblance of normalcy, pretend the abyss hadn't opened at my feet, or plunge forward, follow the breadcrumbs Professor Finch had scattered, and pursue the truth, regardless of the price. The distant wail of sirens grew closer. A dark sedan, windows tinted to inscrutability, cruised slowly down the adjacent street, its passage deliberate, searching. The decision was made. This wasn't an ending. It was an initiation. The real peril, the true quest, lay ahead. Casting a final glance towards the familiar university buildings, the mausoleum of my former existence, I turned and melted into the labyrinthine embrace of the city. Whatever awaited, I would see it through, for Alistair Finch, for the silenced truth, and for the staggering secret that whispered of a transformed world. A disquiet settled over me that first evening, a subtle discord in the symphony of settling in. I recall sinking into the embrace of the tired sofa, adrift amidst the flotsam of unpacked kitchenware, when a low, insistent vibration began to thrum at the edge of my hearing. It emanated from the hallway's terminus, a faint resonance, less a sound than a presence, a whispered chant, perhaps, or a hum so deep it was almost felt rather than heard. Barely perceptible, yet undeniably there. I stilled myself, straining to isolate the source. It pulsed from the final bedroom, the one languishing at the corridor's end, a void I hadn't yet filled with purpose or possessions. Its door stood ajar, framing darkness. The room itself was a blank canvas of bare walls and an unadorned window. Logic dictated silence. Hesitantly, I rose. My feet traced a slow path down the hall. The moment my shadow fell across the threshold, the resonance ceased. Utter stillness. Inside, emptiness reigned supreme. My gaze swept the corners, crawled up the walls to the ceiling, lingered on the naked wooden floorboards. Through the window, the neighbor's fence stood sentinel under the muted glow of distant streetlights. Nothing disturbed the air save the mundane electric sigh of the refrigerator humming faithfully behind me in the kitchen. Retreating to the living room, I tried to banish the incident, assigning it to the realm of external noise. A neighbor's distant radio, voices drifting from the pavement. Yet scarcely 10 minutes later, as I sought refuge once more on the sofa, the low thrum returned. Identical in its hushed insistence, the same texture of muffled murmuring, like a secret prayer spoken just below the threshold of comprehension. Again, I rose, this time with deliberate stealth. The hallway lay cloaked in shadow, illuminated only by the spill of light from the living room. My socked feet whispered across the floorboards, a conscious effort to merge with the silence. As I neared the doorway, the sound persisted. A steady, quiet drone. It continued right up until I breached the room's invisible boundary. The instant my foot crossed the threshold, the hum evaporated. Gone. I flicked the overhead light, bathing the stark white walls in sudden glare. I scoured every angle, peered behind the door, scanned the view outside the window once more. Vacant, mute, solitary. A prickle danced across my skin. A faint sheen of moisture beaded on my brow. There existed no rational explanation. The house, though possessing age, was far from ancient. Recently revitalized, the landlord had assured me. The walls felt solid, substantial. No visible cracks or apertures offered passage for stray whispers. I ventured into the other unoccupied bedroom, explored its closet, knelt by its window, pressed my ear against the walls. Silence. That night, I sought sanctuary in my own bedroom, adjacent to the kitchen, placing distance between myself and the corridor's enigmatic end. Sleep was elusive, my mind circling back to the sound, anticipating its return. But exhaustion eventually claimed me, and the night passed without further incident. The following day unfolded with mundane normalcy. I dedicated the afternoon to constructing my workspace, wrestling with computer cables, and coaxing the internet into life. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating a peaceful neighborhood. Birdsong, the drone of my computer, the sporadic bark of a distant dog. These were the day's sounds. Several times I found myself drawn back to the empty room, scrutinizing it under the clarity of daylight. Just a room. White walls, a window overlooking the front yard, bare wooden floors. No hidden panels, no loose boards. I rapped my knuckles against the plaster. It returned a solid, unyielding thud. Evening descended, and after a solitary meal, I returned to the living room. This time, I intentionally left the door to the empty bedroom open, a silent invitation. I sat in the quiet, the television dark, listening. An hour crawled by before it returned. The low, unwavering hum, the unmistakable texture of a voiceless melody drifting from the room down the hall. A chill traced its path down my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs. Slowly I stood. I didn't advance directly. Instead, I moved with painstaking lightness, attempting to become imperceptible. I wanted to catch it in the act. Closer, closer. The sound held steady. Reaching the doorway, I could discern it more clearly now. Definitely human. A calm, low-pitched, continuous hum. I risked leaning my head past the frame, peering into the dimness. Nobody. The window shut tight. The floor bare. I took a single step forward. Instantly, silence slammed down. The fine hairs on my arms rose. Again, the futile check behind the door, the scan of the ceiling. I even unlatched the window, leaning out into the cool night air, searching for a hidden observer. Only parked cars lining the quiet street, a solitary porch light glowing across the way. I secured the window and retreated. Back in the living room, an idea sparked. My phone. I launched a recording app and waited. 30 minutes dissolved before the humming recommenced. Immediately, I pressed record. Holding the phone aloft like a talisman, I crept towards the room, each footfall measured. The sound persisted, a low drone in the stillness, until I leaned into the doorway. Abruptly, it vanished. I stopped the recording, played it back. Only the whisper of my own breath, the faint hiss of ambient sound. The hum remained uncaptured. A frustrated sigh escaped me. Tension coiled in my neck. I paced the hallway, toggling the light switch on and off in a restless rhythm. I tried lingering just outside the doorway, listening intently. Nothing. The phenomenon seemed contingent on my distance, commencing only when I retreated to the living room or kitchen. That night, I deployed a new strategy. I left my phone inside the empty bedroom, the recording app active, and withdrew to my own room, closing the door. An hour later, I returned. Pausing at the threshold, I listened. Silence. Stepping inside, I retrieved the phone. Reviewing the recording revealed a fleeting victory. A few seconds, somewhere in the middle, captured a faint, low hum before it abruptly cut off. Indistinct, genderless, just a brief sonic signature. Repeated listening yielded no further clarity. Unease began to weave itself into the fabric of my days. Evenings found me skirting the hallway. Work became a refuge, routine a shield. Music became a constant companion. Headphones a barrier against the silence. But inevitably, during moments of quiet, a pause in the music, the television muted, the low hum would reassert itself, a persistent whisper from the empty room. I experimented. Knocking sharply on the hallway wall during the humming brought immediate silence. Calling out, "Is anyone there?" yielded only emptiness. I explored the attic. Insulation, dust, no signs of life. The crawl space beneath the house revealed only pipes and wires. A stepladder allowed close inspection of the bedroom ceiling. No vents, no hidden speakers, simple wiring. The window frame was solid, the closet shallow and ordinary. Sleep became dependent on the television's drone, a constant electronic murmur to mask the other sound. Some nights, curiosity overruled caution. I'd lower the volume, straining to hear. It was always there, waiting. Never louder, never change in pitch. That steady, low hum extinguished the moment I approached the room. One evening, I unearthed an old baby monitor set, purchased years ago on a whim. I placed the transmitter inside the empty room, carrying the receiver to the living room. Static hissed initially. Then, through the crackle, the humming emerged. Clearer now via the cheap plastic speaker, like a voice intoning a short, repeating sequence of notes. Clutching the receiver, I hurried down the hall. The sound died before I reached the door. The transmitter sat undisturbed. Anxiety became my shadow as dusk fell. My appetite waned. Fatigue and nervousness were constant companions. The thought of contacting the landlord surfaced, only to be dismissed. How could I articulate this spectral humming that vanished upon investigation? He'd deem me unstable. Involving a friend felt embarrassing, a burden I was unwilling to share. One desperate night, I decided to confront the phenomenon directly. I laid a sleeping bag on the bare floor of the empty room, switched off all lights, and lay in the absolute darkness, waiting. The house settled into profound quiet. Hours drifted by. As drowsiness began to claim me, I heard it. Distant now, as if originating elsewhere in the house, yet undeniably the same hum. I sat bolt upright, instant silence. Heart pounding, skin clammy with sweat, I waited, breathing in the scent of dust and old wood. The room felt unnaturally cold. I remained there for hours, vigilant, but the sound did not return as long as I occupied the space. The following day left me drained, frustration curdling into anger. I stood in the empty room and spoke aloud, addressing the unseen presence, pleading for peace, stating my benign intentions. No answer came. It remained just a room, stark and silent. 2 weeks into this unsettling cohabitation, my resolve frayed. I borrowed an old handheld tape recorder from a friend, hoping its analog nature might capture what my phone could not. I positioned it in the hallway just outside the room, pressed record, and retreated to the living room, keeping the lights low, the television off. The humming began. I let it establish itself for several minutes, then crept forward, slowly inching the recorder closer to the source. Near the doorway, it stopped. The tape revealed only a few faint seconds of the hum. I tried standing outside in the yard late at night, the empty room's window open, straining to hear. Nothing. I carried the baby monitor receiver outside while the transmitter remained within. Silence. Only upon returning inside, settling back into the living room, did the humming resume. It was intrinsic to the house, specifically that room, and inextricably linked to my proximity. Stuck. Moving felt like admitting defeat, not to mention the logistical nightmare. Yet evenings in the living room became unbearable. I spent increasing time confined to my bedroom, cocooned in music. Still, the mystery gnawed. One night I attempted a different approach, creeping from the kitchen, staying low, avoiding casting a shadow. The hum persisted until the very moment my eyes peeked around the doorframe. Then, instantaneous silence. The jolt never lessened. Each occurrence brought the same rapid heartbeat, the clammy palms, the shallow breath. The idea of furnishing the room, claiming it, felt repellent. The thought of arranging furniture, my back turned, while that uncanny hum might ebb and flow just beyond my senses, induced a visceral nausea. Eventually, I resorted to earplugs at night, supplemented by the white noise of a fan. Some nights, oblivion was possible. Others, curiosity would win, drawing me out into the hallway, only to replay the same frustrating pattern. Hum at a distance, silence upon approach. I never discovered its origin. No hidden device, no spectral figure. My calls into the void, "If someone is there, say something," remained unanswered. Shining a flashlight from afar revealed nothing but empty space. Placing a chair inside, facing the door, proved fruitless. Ultimately, I surrendered. Not in defeat, but in weary acceptance. Quiet evenings in the living room became a rarity. Music played constantly, or the television provided a buffer. Sometimes I fled the house entirely after dark, driving aimlessly to escape the tension, returning late to slip directly into my bedroom. Mornings brought a fragile normalcy. The empty room reverted to mere architecture, 4 walls and a window betraying no secrets. To this day, the humming persists, an intermittent guest in my home. I no longer seek explanations. I haven't caught it, haven't understood it. It remains careful, elusive, falling silent the instant I draw near. It never intensifies, never alters its low, steady drone. I simply maintain my distance, coexist with the inexplicable. There seems little else I can do. That particular clutch of woods snagged my attention late one Friday, a dense knot on the landscape promising the isolation I craved. A profound need for silence, for a space to unravel the tight coil of my thoughts, had driven me out here. I remember halting Elias Vance beside the shadowed threshold, an unexpected magnetism drawing me toward the interior. Branches, contorted and densely interwoven, formed an almost impenetrable screen, swallowing the light mere feet within. Yet it was precisely this untouched quality, this apparent divorce from trail and tarmac, that resonated with my desire for solitude. I stepped forward. My truck remained parked on a meager gravel verge flanking the main road. Hefting my pack, I advanced toward that forbidding tree line. Beneath my boots, the earth yielded softly, a plush carpet woven from seasons of fallen leaves, decaying needles, and perpetually damp soil. Above, a dry skeletal friction whispered through the canopy, branches grating one upon another. Wind, I thought initially, but the air hung utterly still, heavy and close, like breath held too long. A pause, a scan for the expected scurry of squirrels or the flit of birds. Nothing. Forests typically pulse with subtle life, a background hum of birdsong, the rustle of unseen creatures. Here only that slow, scraping complaint from the heights disturbed the profound quiet. Parting low-slung boughs revealed a suggestion of passage, less a path than a trace worn by something persistent. Disturbed leaf litter and snapped twigs marked a route plunging deeper into the gloom. I moved with deliberation, acutely aware of maintaining my bearings, tying a blaze-orange bandana to a branch near the entrance. A defiant splash of color against the muted tones, my anchor to the world outside. Perhaps 15 minutes dissolved into the woods before I registered the premature twilight descending. Overhead, the canopy formed such a suffocating lattice that sunlight fractured into scarce, attenuated beams. With each step, the air grew cooler, raising gooseflesh on my arms, my vision straining to accommodate the deepening shadows. Peripheral flickers, phantom movements near the tree trunks, teased the edges of my sight. Branches swaying, I assured myself, yet an undeniable unease coiled within me. I pressed onward, drawn by the prospect of flatter ground glimpsed ahead, a suitable place to make camp. Eventually, the trees relented slightly, opening into a small clearing, scarcely large enough for my one-man shelter. It stood encircled by towering ramrod-straight trees, their bark obscured by thick cloaks of umber moss. Sparse, patchy grass carpeted the clearing's floor. This, I decided, would be my refuge. No charrings, no discarded wrappers. It seemed untouched by recent human presence, reinforcing its seclusion. I shrugged off my pack, its weight settling onto the grass. My shirt clung, damp with perspiration. The humidity within these woods was palpable, a sealed microclimate distinct from the world I'd left behind. A moment to reclaim my breath, my pulse a heavy thrumming in my ears, a strange tingling current running down my arms. I shook my head, dismissing the sensation, and set to my tasks. The ground sheet unfurled, the small tent erected, the gathering of stones into a rudimentary fire ring. Usually, a fire meant comfort, warmth, a bulwark against the night. But here, surrounded by such profound darkness, I hesitated, wondering if flames would merely animate the shadows, lending them a grotesque life. As I arranged the stones, a faint susurrus reached me, less sound than texture, like a whispered word. Instinctively, I spun around. Nothing. It came again, this time seemingly from my left. No discernible language, just an alien cadence, a rhythmic quality that made my scalp tighten. My gaze swept the silent trees, finding no source. I stood frozen, listening, straining to decipher if it was merely wind carrying a distant voice. Yet the sound felt intimate, immediate, gliding between the ancient trunks. I circled the clearing's perimeter, peering into the dense undergrowth, half expecting a hidden prankster, a fellow hiker. The woods remained empty. The whispering ceased, leaving a silence more profound than before. My breath caught, lodged somewhere in my throat as I waited. My heart hammered against my ribs, but after long seconds, only stillness answered. Returning to the nascent campsite, I finished my preparations, unrolling my sleeping bag within the tent, arranging flashlight, knife, and water bottle within easy reach. I sat for a spell, forcing slow, deliberate breath, attempting to quell the tremor in my hands. Nerves, I reasoned. Unfamiliar places often put me on edge. Perhaps 10 minutes later, I emerged. The light, though still dim, carried the undeniable signature of encroaching evening. Firewood was essential before full dark descended. I headed toward a fallen giant I'd noted earlier. Mid-stride, the hairs on my neck prickled sharply. I stopped, turned. A shape, fleeting, indistinct, slipped behind a thick tree bole. Vaguely human in outline, yet its movement possessed an unnerving fluidity, too smooth, too silent. "Hello." My voice sounded thin, absorbed by the dense air. Silence replied. Cautiously, I approached the spot. Behind the substantial trunk grew a cluster of tall ferns. I pushed them aside. Nothing. The damp earth, littered with twigs, showed no fresh prints, no sign of passage. Standing there, shifting my weight, I felt a surge of adrenaline tighten my throat, quicken my breathing. Snatching up several brittle branches from the log, I broke them across my knee and retreated hastily to my camp, casting frequent glances over my shoulder. The sensation of being watched was intense, each step back to the tent stretching into an eternity. Once there, I coaxed a small fire to life. The lighter sparked eagerly, catching the tinder, and soon fragile flames licked upward. As I fed it more twigs, the firelight strengthened, painting monstrous, flickering caricatures on the surrounding trees. Their shadows writhed across the clearing floor, elongating and contracting, seemingly independent of the flames that cast them. A knot formed low in my belly as I watched their dance. By the time the sun relinquished its final hold, the blackness beyond my small circle of firelight was absolute. Renewed rustling stirred the leaves, now emanating from multiple points around me, sometimes near, sometimes distant. My breathing grew shallow, my hands unsteady. Sweat trickled down my temples despite the cooling air. My flashlight beam probed the tree line, a nervous sentinel seeking movement in the oppressive dark. Sometime around 8 or 9, time had become elastic. The whispers returned. Louder now, clearer, yet still incomprehensible. It sounded like several voices intertwined, speaking in that same unfamiliar tongue, the sounds possessing a harsh, guttural edge fused with a disturbing chant-like rhythm. My entire body locked tight, mouth parched. I tried to call out, managing only a strangled croak. "Who's out there?" The whispers abruptly ceased. Silence descended once more, heavy and expectant. Minutes later, beyond the fire's reach, a form materialized. Tall, with limbs that seemed unnaturally long, its features lost in shadow. It lingered for a heartbeat, then melted back behind a cluster of trees. I scrambled to my feet, flashlight and knife clutched tight, my mind racing. A hermit? Someone feral, living rough? Part of me wanted to shout again, but fear paralyzed my voice. I resolved to stay close to the fire, feeding it diligently, hoping its light offered some measure of deterrence. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat constricting my chest. Bile rose in my throat. The image of that silent, fluid figure burned behind my eyes, the certainty of its unseen gaze, a physical weight. Later, a low moan drifted through the trees, wind-like yet imbued with a distinctly human sorrow. It rose, fell, and faded, leaving behind an even deeper disquiet. My thoughts spiraled, grasping for rational explanations that offered no comfort. Every snap of a twig sent jolts through my overwrought muscles, my shoulders aching from the sustained tension. Flashlight in hand, I decided on a brief perimeter sweep. Stepping just beyond the fire's glow, I played the beam across the undergrowth. Everything appeared still, yet the light revealed worn patches on the ground, subtle trails suggesting repeated passage, bent ferns, freshly snapped branches. Then farther out, the beam caught them, impressions in the soft earth. Footprints but strangely shaped, narrow, elongated, the stride impossibly long. My heart hammered against my sternum. These tracks led away, deeper into the forest's core. Retreating to the dwindling fire, I stood staring into the engulfing blackness. And then I saw it again, shifted to the right this time. It emerged from behind a thick trunk, raised a long arm in a gesture that felt unmistakably like beckoning. A chill, colder than the night air, seeped into my bones. My legs felt like water, yet a morbid curiosity warred with primal fear, pulling me a step forward. The figure retreated smoothly into the shadows. No face visible, only that disturbing outline. A soft, dry, clicking sound accompanied its withdrawal, like pebbles being tapped together. My flashlight beam stabbed in that direction, illuminating only bark and leaves. The notion of following that entity into the pitch-black unknown was abhorrent, yet remaining felt equally perilous, like waiting in a trap. Pack up? Flee now? The thought was countered by the image of stumbling through this lightless maze with whatever lurked therein. Dawn. I would wait for dawn. Dousing the fire to minimize my visibility, I retreated into the tent, leaving the zipper slightly open, a narrow slit onto the hostile world outside. Flashlight clutched fiercely, knife resting on my thigh. Inside the thin nylon shell lying atop my sleeping bag, every muscle remained coiled, my skin clammy. My heartbeat pounded against my eardrums. Intermittently, the whispers returned, or the faint clicking, sometimes unnervingly close, sometimes distant. Time crawled. My phone screen indicated only an hour had passed. It felt like half the night. I focused on my breathing, counting inhalations, exhalations, a desperate mantra against rising panic. At one point, the whispers were directly outside the tent wall. They coalesced into a single voice, chanting. The words, sharp and guttural, seemed to vibrate not just in the air, but within my very skull, creating a painful pressure behind my eyes. My vision blurred momentarily. My mouth was utterly dry. Snapping on the flashlight, I aimed its beam at the tent fabric. The chanting cut off instantly. I heard rapid footfalls receding into the woods. Sleep was impossible now. I sat rigid in the darkness, listening. My body screamed for rest, but my mind, hyper-alert, refused. Each tiny sound elicited a physical jerk. My joints ached, my neck stiff, my back slick with cold sweat where the sleeping bag clung. Sometime deep in the night, a shadow slid past the front of my tent. I froze, holding my breath. It paused. The low clicking sound returned, closer now, almost inquisitive. Then it moved on, leaving silence in its wake. When the first hesitant strokes of gray finally infiltrated the sky, I tore open the tent zipper. Packing became a frantic, clumsy affair, stuffing gear into my backpack with trembling hands. Breakfast was unthinkable. Escape was the only imperative. In the nascent light, the forest seemed marginally less menacing, yet the oppressive atmosphere lingered. The silence still felt charged, watched. A faint ringing persisted in my ears, a residue of tension. Locating my orange bandana, I followed my inbound trail, moving as quickly as I dared without breaking into a run. Twigs cracked underfoot like gunshots, branches snagged at my clothes, seemingly reluctant to release me. Compulsive backward glances revealed nothing but trees, yet the feeling of pursuit remained. Once or twice, I thought I heard the whispers, faint and far off now, urging me onward, or perhaps warning me away. My heart pounded relentlessly, the pack straps biting into my aching shoulders. Every muscle fiber screamed for cessation, but I pushed on. The sight of my truck at the forest edge triggered a ragged exhalation of relief. My hands shook so violently I fumbled the keys, dropping them onto the gravel. Finally, the door yielded. I tossed the pack onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, and twisted the ignition. the engine roaring to life, felt like salvation. My palms were slick on the steering wheel as I pulled away. A final glance in the rearview mirror showed the forest entrance, a dark aperture that seemed to absorb the morning light. Relief surged, potent and dizzying, as distance grew between me and those woods. The whispers faded from the air, but not from my mind. Their alien cadence echoed internally. The drive home was a blur of hyper-awareness, every roadside shape a potential threat, my head swimming slightly. I carried with me the indelible certainty of an encounter with something inexplicable, the memory of that chanting, those elongated silhouettes, a haunting refrain. I've never returned to that stretch of forest. I doubt I ever will. The allure of solitude remains, but now I seek it in places touched by others, campsites marked by the comforting echoes of human voices and the familiar glow of shared fires. Anything but that silent, suffocating growth and the strange murmurs that still visit my thoughts in the deepest quiet. Three days into my self-imposed exile within my Uncle Cormac's skeletal farmhouse, the key surfaced. It lay sequestered in the depths of his desk drawer, a small artifact of brass, almost black with the patina of years, nestled amongst brittle correspondence and desiccated ink pens. Ordinarily, such a find would warrant little notice, yet the intricate knotwork, unmistakably Celtic, spiraling across its head, snagged my attention. My hands, already grimed from sifting through the sedimentary layers of a life concluded, paused. This inheritance, a remote, sea-battered farmhouse clinging to an island shore in County Clare, had arrived like a bolt from the gray Irish sky. Uncle Cormac existed only twice in my memory's flickering reel, ephemeral glimpses dominated by the bush of his beard and the spectral aroma of pipe smoke. Now at 35, stripped bare by a divorce that had claimed half my assets and the lion's share of my confidence following Chiara's departure, I stood proprietor of this dilapidated holding, a relic untouched by diligent care since the Thatcher years faded. The house groaned under the weight of its neglect. Rain wept through the roof in triplicate lament. The plumbing shuddered with death rattles, and dust lay like funerary shrouds over every surface. Still, it was mine. This forgotten fragment of ancestry felt less like property and more like a final desperate mooring in the wreckage of my life. Day 4 yielded the attic's hidden mouth. Camouflaged beneath a threadbare rug in the room that must have served as Cormac's study, a cramped space bowed by shelves laden with leaning towers of books, lay a trap door. Its brass ring pull mirrored the key's tarnished hue. When I introduced key to lock, the heavy padlock yielded with a protesting shriek, showering the floorboards with rust's orange tears. No ladder waited. Peering into the Stygian square above, only absolute blackness stared back. I wrestled a stepladder from the bed of my truck, the ascent into the attic proving a clumsy, awkward affair. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating a familiar chaos. Spectral furniture draped in white sheets, sarcophagi of cardboard overflowing with papers, trunks, and valises huddled against the slanted eaves. Yet positioned dead center on the floorboards, stark and deliberate, sat a substantial wooden chest. Perhaps 3 feet in length, 2 in height, Fashioned from dark timber and bound with bands of iron, it alone defied the attic's pervasive dust. Its surface gleamed, unnaturally clean, suggesting a recent, meticulous wiping. Another brass padlock, twin to the one below, secured its hasp. The small Celtic-patterned key turned in this lock, too, a whisper of tumblers falling. Inside, photographs, a deluge of them, loose, uncatalogued, spilling forth the moment the lid creaked open. All monochrome phantoms, mostly jaundiced by time. As my fingers sifted through them, a pattern emerged. They chronicled one man, tall, lean, dark-haired, his expression perpetually grave. Uncle Cormac, decades younger than the man etched in my faint recollections. The images spanned unseen years. Some captured a younger Cormac, his hair ink-dark, his face less etched by time and weather. In others, the first frost of gray feathered his temples. Yet two constants persisted through every frame. Cormac stood invariably alone, and lurking in the periphery, someone, something observed him. It wasn't immediately apparent. The first photograph I studied, set within what seemed the farmhouse kitchen, drew my focus to Cormac's solemn visage. Only as I moved to set it aside did I register the form within the shadowed doorway behind him. A tenebrous shape, little more than a smeared silhouette, yet undeniably human in scale and posture. The emulsion there was blurred, distorted, as if by a tremor of the camera or a flaw in the film. But I could discern the impression of a head angled towards Cormac's unsuspecting back. A clammy dampness bloomed on my palms as I navigated the stack. Cormac in the garden patch, unearthing potatoes, while an umbral presence watched from the lee of the stone dike. Cormac sunk in his armchair, absorbed in a book, the identical blurred attendant visible through the window pane behind. Cormac trudging the boreen for his post, and there, nested deep within the skeletal trees, that familiar dark smear, forever oriented towards him, forever watching. Undated, the photographs nonetheless narrated the cycle of seasons. Foliage burgeoning and retreating, snow blanketing the earth, improbable wildflowers bursting forth. Through it all, the figure remained, a constant, predatory satellite, sometimes nearer, sometimes receding, yet omnipresent, always watching. My hands trembled violently by the time I grazed the chest's wooden floor. The final photograph depicted Cormac seated at his desk, the very desk where the key had lain hidden. He appeared older here, closer to the vague image I retained. In the corner of the study it stood, the Watcher, and though characteristically indistinct, a sickening certainty clenched my gut. It was closer than in any preceding image. I thrust the photographs back into the chest, slamming the heavy lid down. The sound cannonaded through the attic's stillness, instantly shrinking the space, making the air thick and suffocating. I scrambled down the stepladder, hauled it awkwardly through the opening, and forced the trapdoor shut. My fingers fumbled, shaking too severely to easily engage the padlock's shackle. That night, the footsteps began. I lay rigid in bed, attempting to rationalize the photographic evidence. Double exposures, perhaps. An eccentric artistic endeavor? Pareidolia born of stress and isolation? The old house was a symphony of groans and sighs. floorboards complaining under phantom weight, foundations settling deeper into the earth, wind keening through the eaves. I'd grown accustomed to its nocturnal chorus. But these footfalls were alien. They originated directly overhead, from the sealed attic, measured deliberate treads pacing from one end of the confined space to the other, back and forth, back and forth. Access was solely via the trapdoor I had meticulously re-secured. The stepladder leaned against the downstairs wall, precisely where I'd abandoned it. The padlock on the trapdoor gleamed dully in my flashlight's beam when I forced myself to check, my heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Yet the footsteps persisted. A fine rain of dust sifted from the ceiling plaster with each measured impact. I stood frozen in the study, light aimed uselessly upwards, listening to something perambulate a space that ought to be empty, a space that ought to be inviolate. Sleep became a forgotten country that night, and the next. The footsteps returned with the darkness, tracing their relentless path, back and forth, like a caged thing, like a patient thing, waiting. On the third day, desperation drove me back to Cormac's papers. Answers had to lie somewhere within the chaotic strata of his desk. Drawer after drawer yielded the mundane detritus of a solitary life. Shopping lists, paid invoices, notebooks filled with his spidery, cramped script, detailing tractor repairs and feed orders. But in the lowest drawer, buried beneath a cairn of yellowed newspapers, lay a journal bound in worn leather. The inaugural entry, dated 1975. It watches me again, omnipresent now. Initially dismissed as imagination, mere tricks of shadow and light. The photographs, however, offer immutable proof, there in every frame drawing nearer. Its motives remain opaque. Why it selected me, a mystery. But its patience, abyssal. Always watching, always waiting, never speaking, never moving whilst under direct observation, just watching, ever watching. Years unfolded across the brittle pages. Cormac chronicled futile attempts at evasion, journeys to Dublin, to London, even a 6-month sojourn in America proved fruitless. The attendant shadow followed, relentless, observant, patient. The entries acquired a patina of deepening despair over time. The final inscription, penned just a fortnight before his death. It is within the house now. I hear it nocturnally, pacing the attic, seeking ingress. The trapdoor is locked, bolted, but such measures feel temporary. Nothing will suffice. It draws so near. Reflections betray its presence now, standing just behind me, perpetually over my shoulder. Always blurred, indistinct, yet gaining clarity daily. Soon, I fear, I shall discern its face. I do not wish to see its face. God preserve me, I do not wish to see its face. Tucked within the journal's final pages, I found Cormac's death certificate. Cardiac arrest, stated the sterile text. Discovered in his study, slumped across the desk. His features, noted the Garda report, were contorted in an expression of profound terror. The footsteps possess a greater resonance now. They are no longer confined to the night. Sometimes in the flat light of midday, I hear that slow, inexorable pacing traversing the ceiling above. Occasionally a scratching joins the rhythm as if something claws, testing the barrier between its space and mine. Yesterday, aiming my phone for a foolish selfie, I captured it. Deleted instantly, but the image burned onto my retinas. That smeared shape hovering behind me, just past my shoulder. Mirrors have become treacherous landscapes. I perceive flickers at the edge of sight, swift movements vanishing the instant my gaze shifts. The photographs remain entombed in their chest, sealed in the attic's dusty dark. A morbid curiosity sometimes whispers, urging me to ascend again, to scrutinize them, search for some overlooked detail, some clue to this thing's nature, its desire. But the thought of unlatching that trap door paralyzes me. Not now. Not knowing something resides up there, pacing an emptiness that isn't empty, drawing closer with each passing hour. I commit this account to paper because the silence needs breaking, because someone must know. Tomorrow I abandon this place, sell the farmhouse, flee, put as much distance between myself and this cursed island as possible. Perhaps it won't adhere to me as it did to Cormac. Perhaps fortune will favor me. Yet last night, whilst packing, I glimpsed my reflection in the darkened pane of the bedroom window. For one heart-stopping second, the blur resolved. The figure standing behind me was no longer indistinct. I saw its face, every horrific detail. It was smiling. The car speeds south towards Dublin now, towards imagined sanctuary. But each time my eyes flick to the rearview mirror, something occupies the back seat. A shadow, a distortion at the edge of perception. For now, comprehension dawns, cold and absolute, illuminating the true nature of Cormac's final bequest. He wasn't gifting me a refuge. He was merely ensuring the continuity, passing it on. The footsteps never truly ceased. They simply found a new host to follow. The memory clings, sharp as shattered glass. The first night the receiver pulsed with life when it shouldn't have. Midnight, or near enough, had settled thick and heavy over the aged commercial edifice where I kept watch. Elias, that's me, night sentinel at the front desk, a fixture here for years uncounted. After 9, the building usually exhaled its last breath of activity. Offices shuttered by 6, cleaning crews vanished by 8, leaving only the hum of surveillance feeds and myself adrift in the echoing quiet. Even the corridor lights dimmed their wattage near the witching hour, conserving power, deepening the void. Emptiness was the norm, a companion I'd grown accustomed to. That night, though, the silence fractured. I was slumped in the lobby's worn swivel chair, throne of my nocturnal kingdom behind the faux marble counter. On the small television perched before me, muted figures gestured through some forgotten late-night program. A single earbud fed me the drone of talk radio, a bulwark against drowsiness. Then the intercom beside my elbow erupted. Not a ring precisely, but a low, insistent buzz that jolted me upright. My gaze flicked to the wall clock. 12 struck dead. Lifting the handset, I managed. "Lobby." My voice, a stranger's tremor in the stillness. That phone seldom stirred past 10, let alone at the stroke of midnight. A pause stretched, thin and electric, maybe 3 heartbeats long. Then a man's voice, level as a still lake, devoid of inflection. I have a delivery intended for you. Something of yours, misplaced long ago." A current of ice traced patterns down my arms. He spoke with unnerving certainty, as if addressing an old acquaintance about a shared secret. But the words were hieroglyphs to me. I cleared a throat suddenly gone rough. "What delivery?" I countered, striving for authority. "Who is this? Identify your flaw." Another beat of silence hung in the connection. "Ascend," he instructed softly. "I reside on your floor." The line clicked dead. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed hard against my ear, listening to the hiss of static devolve into the dial tone's vacant hum. The phone's small, antiquated display glowed faintly. "Floor 13, it read. Impossibility tightened its grip. This building possessed only 12 floors above ground. I stared, bewildered, before slowly cradling the handset. A frantic drummer had taken up residence behind my ribs. My mouth felt parchment dry. My eyes swept the lobby, the familiar glow near the entrance, my own distorted reflection staring back from the revolving glass doors. Uniform rumpled, a bead of sweat tracing a path down my temple. Usually, the gentle whir of ceiling fans was the loudest sound. Tonight, a faint, high-pitched ringing filled my own ears, my body's bewildered response to the inexplicable. Pushing away from the desk, I walked on unsteady legs toward the elevator bank. The call button yielded to my touch with ordinary compliance. An elevator descended, its doors sighing open. I stepped into the flickering confines of the lift. The intermittent light was common. The building wore its age heavily. My eyes scanned the panel, buttons marked G, then 1 through 12. No 13, naturally. Superstition had erased it from most blueprints of this vintage. I pressed 12. The ascent felt unnaturally slow, ponderous. Normally, a subtle shift in pressure registered around the 6th floor, but tonight, only a cold tension coiled in my gut. The doors parted on the 12th floor's dim corridor. Vacancy reigned. The small insurance firm occupying this level had long since departed. Their locked doors stood sentinel under the low lights. The air hung stale, untouched. Methodically, I checked each entrance, rattling handles. All secure. No sliver of light escaped from beneath any door. No soul present. Defeated, I retreated to the elevator. Perhaps a prankster lurked below, meddling with the ancient phone system in the basement. I pressed B. The car sank. Down in the subterranean storage, amidst forgotten boxes and the ghosts of cleaning supplies, I found nothing amiss. The wall-mounted phone there wore a thick shroud of dust, clearly untouched for ages. Running a finger across its surface confirmed its disuse. Lifting the receiver yielded only the expected dial tone. Back in the lobby, the remainder of my shift unfolded in profound silence. Yet the unease clung to me like damp wool. The following night, normalcy held sway until the clock hands converged once more. Then the same guttural buzz from the desk phone. The display flickered. My pulse leaped. Hesitantly, I lifted the receiver. "Hello?" The voice returned, calm, insistent. "Elias, ascend. I hold something for you. Something you lost." My voice was tight. "What? What did I lose?" A brief silence, then. "You will recognize it. Come to my floor." A surge of frustration broke through my fear. "There is no 13th floor," I nearly shouted into the plastic. The connection severed. This time, investigation felt futile. I remained rooted behind the desk, palms slick against the cool surface. My foot tapped an anxious rhythm on the polished tile. Sporadic glances toward the elevators revealed nothing. The security monitors displayed only the familiar emptiness of 12 floors and a basement, static images of unoccupied space. A knot formed deep in my stomach, a cold dread mingling with morbid curiosity. The urge to flee warred with the obligation of my shift. I sat, a prisoner of the clock, waiting. By 6 a.m., the building stirred back to life. The first early birds trickling in, oblivious. I went home, seeking sleep, but found only the echo of that strange, placid voice. Over the next few days, tentative inquiries with the building manager yielded little. He offered shrugs and platitudes about the archaic internal phone system, prone to crossed wires and ghost signals. Had there ever been a 13th floor? He professed ignorance. The building's origins were lost to time, its earliest records fragmented. A glitch in the phone's display, perhaps. Plausible, yet it failed to account for the voice knowing my name, the chillingly specific claim of a long-lost item. My shifts became vigils. I patrolled the corridors before midnight, checked connections, scrutinized camera feeds. All remained quiet until the witching hour struck. Then the inevitable buzz, the spectral 13 on the display. Always the same disembodied voice, the same cryptic summons. Elias, I possess something of yours. Lost, long ago. Ascend. My questions about his identity were met with silence, or the unsettlingly familiar, "You know me." Then, the click. One night, after nearly a week besieged by these spectral calls, resolve hardened within me. Enough was enough. As midnight approached, I stood waiting by the desk. The phone buzzed on cue. I answered. "I am waiting," the voice stated, devoid of preamble. "The elevator is open." My heart hammered against my ribs. The line went dead. Lowering the receiver, I walked toward the elevator bank. True to the voice's word, one car stood open, its interior light stuttering erratically. An elevator shouldn't wait unbidden. I stepped inside. The panel remained unchanged, G 1 through 12. But as my eyes adjusted, I perceived it, a faint luminescence hovering in the space between the 12 button and where a 14 might logically sit. The numeral 13, ghostly, etched behind the brushed steel. My finger, trembling slightly, found the phantom spot. For a moment, nothing. Then the doors whispered shut. The ascent began, slower this time, viscid. My breath hitched. I watched the illuminated numbers climb. 10, 11, 12. Then darkness. The indicator remained blank, yet upward we crawled, the cables groaning under unseen strain. With a sudden jolt, the car stopped. The doors slid open onto a hallway utterly alien. Dim light struggled against oppressive shadows. The walls, coated in peeling paint the color of old bruises, seemed to sweat condensation. Beneath my feet, a stained, threadbare carpet muffled my steps. A faint, musty odor permeated the air, laced with a chill draft that spoke of open windows, though none were visible. Hesitantly, I stepped out, keeping one foot poised on the threshold. 3 doors punctuated the corridor's length, 2 to the left, 1 to the right. All bore the marks of time, chipped paint, tarnished nameplates whose engravings were lost to grime and age. Silence pressed in, broken only by the frantic thrumming in my ears. My own breathing sounded unnaturally loud. Taking a tentative step forward, the elevator doors slid shut behind me with unnerving finality. I spun, heart leaping, but the wall was smooth, featureless. No call button offered retreat. My throat constricted. I approached the first door on the left. Its knob felt greasy, cold, locked. I rapped softly. Silence answered. The second door yielded the same result. The door on the right, however, stood slightly ajar. From within seeped a low, buzzing hum, the death rattle of an old fluorescent tube. Palms damp, I pushed it open. The room beyond was stark. Cracked plaster walls, bare concrete floor. A single flickering overhead bulb cast unreliable light. In the center stood a plain wooden table. Upon it rested a small metal box, perhaps 6 inches square, secured by a simple latch. Hesitation warred with compulsion. The room felt vacant, yet the sensation of being watched prickled the skin on my arms. I moved toward the table, breath shallow. My fingers fumbled with the latch, lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a ring. A simple silver band, dulled with tarnish. Recognition struck like a physical blow. My ex-wife's ring, the one I'd worn, the one I'd lost years ago in some forgotten parking lot, vanished without a trace. I picked it up, tracing a familiar tiny scratch on the inner curve. Real. Impossible, yet undeniably real. My stomach churned. Clutching the cold metal, I scanned the empty room again. Then behind me a phone began to ring. I turned. Tucked in a shadowed corner, unnoticed until now, sat an old black rotary phone coated in dust. It rang again, a shrill, demanding sound that sent adrenaline coursing through me. I crossed the room, lifted the heavy bakelite receiver. Before words could form, the voice filled my ear, unchanged. "That is yours. Do not misplace it again." My own voice, when I found it, was a shaky whisper. "Who are you?" A pause, then the familiar, chilling reply. "You know me." Click. Silence. I replaced the handset, stood listening to the frantic beat of my own heart. Escape. I needed to leave. Back in the hallway, I turned toward where the elevator should have been. Blank wall. Cold, solid plaster met my questing fingers. Panic flared, hot and sharp. I stumbled back, glancing wildly at the locked doors. Then behind me the soft chime of an elevator arriving. I whirled around. The doors stood open once more, the flickering light within beckoning. I scrambled inside, jabbing the L button for the lobby. The doors closed, and the car plummeted downwards, a dizzying, stomach-lurching descent. 10 seconds, maybe less, and the doors opened onto the familiar, blessedly normal lobby. I staggered out, gasping, the ring clutched tight in my left hand. The lobby was as I'd left it. The clock showed 12:05 a.m. Only 5 minutes had passed? It felt like an eternity. My shirt clung damply to my back. The front doors remained locked. The street outside slept under the jaundiced glow of the lamps. Returning to the desk, I placed the ring on the counter, staring at its tarnished surface. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a profound, disorienting confusion. How? The question echoed unanswered in the cavern of my mind. The rest of the night passed in watchful silence. The phone remained inert. When the morning relief arrived, I fled home, drained and hollow-eyed, sleep an elusive phantom. The next night, Midnight came and went without incident. No buzz, no spectral caller. The night after, the same. The calls from the 13th floor ceased as abruptly as they had begun. I checked the elevator panel repeatedly. The phantom luminescence between 12 and G was gone. Pressing the spot yielded nothing. Everything was precisely as it had always been. Except me. I carry the ring now, tucked deep in my pocket. Sometimes I take it out, feel its cool weight against my palm, a tangible anchor to an event that defies logic. The building manager remains oblivious, attributing the episode to faulty wiring, a system anomaly unique to my station. No one else heard the calls. No one else glimpsed that decaying corridor. But I know. The smell of mold and dust, the flickering light, the cold heft of the metal box, the icy grip of fear. These sensations are etched into my memory. The voice telling me not to lose the ring again. I still work the night shift in this old building. The silence is deeper now, somehow, freighted with potential. Every ring of the phone after midnight sends a jolt through me, but it's always a tenant working late, a misdial, something mundane. No more impossible floors, no more cryptic messages. Yet as the clock creeps toward 12, my eyes invariably drift to the elevator bank. I watch the lights, half dreading, half hoping for a sign, a flicker of the impossible. Part of me craves answers, a return to that hidden place. Another, larger part recoils from the memory of that chilling disquiet. I cannot explain the ring's reappearance, nor the existence of that phantom floor. I only know I was there. I saw. I retrieved what was lost. The memory remains stark and unsettling, so I do my job. I watch the lobby, answer the calls, walk my rounds. And at midnight, I wait. Sometimes there is only silence, sometimes a call from a floor that exists. But I will never forget the calls that came from the 13th, urging me upward to reclaim a piece of my past. I don't expect it to happen again, but I am ready. And this time, I won't let the ring go.